The cage was cold, its iron bars biting into the skin of her wrists as she pressed against them. Rachel Parks had once been a normal girl, raised in a quiet neighborhood outside of Denver, Colorado. She had dreams, college, travel, maybe one day owning a small art studio. But those dreams had withered into smoke the night they took her. It was a party at a friend's house. She remembered the music, the laughter, and the faint bitterness in her drink. The last thing she saw was the bathroom mirror as her vision blurred, and then came darkness. She woke in a truck, wrists bound, mouth taped, surrounded by faces she did not recognize. One of them smiled as he whispered, "Your property now." They called her a number, not a name. Her days blurred into each other, spent in a dark warehouse with peeling paint and mildew. She was moved like cattle from one location to the next, always blindfolded. She learned to listen to the sound of boots, the clink of keys, the thick accents of men who barked orders. Her world shrank to the cage, the faces of other girls, and the quiet sobs in the dark. In those early days, Rachel wanted to die, but something inside her refused. She began paying attention, memorizing routines when the guards changed shifts, who brought food, the names they shouted at each other. She counted the steps between her cage and the exit, the sounds of trucks arriving and leaving. Every detail mattered. One night, a new man arrived. He was taller than the others, his suit impeccable, his watch gleaming in the dim light. He called himself Victor Hall. He spoke softly, promising the girls safety if they behaved. Rachel saw through the mask. He was the one who controlled the shipments, the money, the entire operation. Victor liked control, but he liked money more. Rachel heard him on the phone, laughing as he discussed clients and payments. "I'll have the next batch ready by Friday," he said once. "The senator's request will be handled personally." That night, something inside Rachel snapped. They weren't just monsters, they were connected. Politicians, businessmen, people with influence. The world wasn't blind, it was complicit. Her opportunity came in the form of a loose latch. She spent weeks watching the guard with the limp, an older man named Mason who always left his keys too close to the cage. One night, when his attention drifted, Rachel slipped the keys into her sleeve. It wasn't immediate. She waited, counted the steps, listened for the quietest moment. Then she ran. The night air was bitter against her skin as she stumbled through the back alleys of an industrial park. Dogs barked in the distance. She ducked into a drainage tunnel, waited for dawn, and emerged covered in grime, but free. She stole clothes from a laundromat, paid cash for a bus ticket to Chicago, and disappeared into the cracks of the city. Rachel became Emily Quinn. She changed her hair, adopted a new accent, and vanished into the digital void. But she hadn't forgotten. Every name, every face, every whispered conversation haunted her. She couldn't forget, because forgetting meant they won. And Emily wasn't going to let them win. She spent years rebuilding herself. She learned to code, to hack into systems, to create identities so clean they passed every background check. She infiltrated networks used by traffickers, mapping out their routes, learning the patterns of their money transfers. She posed as a consultant for logistics companies, gathering data under the guise of efficiency audits. Her revenge was patient. She gathered proof, ledgers showing payments from Victor Hall to local law enforcement, photographs of girls transported in shipping containers, audio recordings of bribed politicians discussing hush money. She didn't just want them arrested, she wanted them publicly ruined. One night, Emily stood in a rented apartment overlooking the city skyline. The laptop on the table before her displayed a web of connections. Offshore accounts, names, addresses. The network was vast, but not invincible. She had planted digital time bombs in their systems, subtle alterations that would trigger simultaneous leaks. She sent encrypted files to trusted journalists, law enforcement agencies, and human rights organizations. The messages were simple. The truth is in the files. Follow the money. Follow the names. Each package contained undeniable evidence, videos, bank records, and contracts that implicated the traffickers, their allies, and the powerful men who paid for silence. The morning news exploded with scandal. Senators were named, CEOs were implicated, protests erupted in cities across the country. Victor Hall's face, once hidden behind expensive suits and private jets, was plastered across every screen. The world watched as his empire crumbled, his accounts frozen, his properties seized. But Emily wasn't satisfied. She knew Victor would run. He had safe houses, contacts, and resources hidden away. She tracked his movements using the very systems he built. She watched as he fled to a private estate in Vermont, surrounded by armed guards and reinforced gates. It wouldn't save him. Emily packed a bag and left Chicago that night, her heart steady, her mind clear. She wasn't just bringing justice, she was bringing the end. The train hummed beneath her feet as it sped northward, slicing through landscapes shrouded in fog. Emily sat alone, her reflection merging with the streaks of passing trees in the window. In her bag were tools of precision, encrypted drives, unregistered phones, a simple pistol, and a set of forged credentials. Victor Hall had fled to his Vermont estate, but he wasn't hiding. He was fortifying mansion, and armed guards could stop what was coming. She arrived just after sunset. The estate sprawled across rolling hills like a scar of wealth and arrogance, iron gates gleaming under motion lights. Security cameras dotted the perimeter, but Emily knew how to slip past them. She'd studied the estate's layout, mapped the guards' patrols, and memorized the blind spots. In the cover of night, she crawled through the underbrush, mud soaking into her clothes. She bypassed the alarms, scaled the stone wall at its weakest point, and landed soundlessly in the garden. The scent of roses drifted on the air. Emily moved like a shadow, pressing herself against the side of the house. Inside, the estate was silent, save for the clink of ice in a glass. Victor stood alone in the study, swirling his drink, staring at a wall of monitors streaming news coverage. His face, gaunt and pale, twisted with rage as he watched footage of senators being arrested and properties seized. He hadn't expected the world to turn against him so quickly. Emily planted a device on the security system's main hub, scrambling the cameras, unlocking doors. She slipped into the house and moved toward the study. The pistol in her hand was heavy, but it wasn't for shooting. It was for control. When she stepped into the room, Victor turned, his face going white. He reached for a gun hidden in his desk, but Emily was faster. She shot once into the wood beside his hand, making him freeze. "Sit," she said, voice steady. Victor obeyed, the glass falling from his hand, shattering on the carpet. "You thought you could cage me," Emily whispered, her voice low and cutting. "But I learned from you. I learned how to break people, how to make them bleed without touching them. Tonight, you're going to understand what it means to be truly powerless." She cuffed his wrist behind the chair, dragged him to the hidden panic room disguised behind a bookshelf, and locked him inside. The walls were soundproof, the cameras disabled. There was no food, no water, no communication to the outside. "Enjoy your cage, Victor," she said softly, her breath fogging the glass as she sealed the door. But her work wasn't done. Emily moved through the estate, planting devices in the servers, destroying physical records. She accessed the estate's secure network, unleashing data packets she'd spent years compiling, evidence of human trafficking, bribes, murders, and smuggling routes. She made sure every file, every transaction linked directly to Victor Hall and his associates. As dawn broke, Emily stood on the hill overlooking the burning estate. Flames licked the edges of the mansion, smoke rising in thick, choking plumes. Sirens echoed in the distance, fire trucks, police, but she knew it was too late. The evidence had already been sent. The files had been broadcast to every major media outlet, encrypted only long enough for her escape. Victor's empire collapsed before the sun had fully risen. His safe houses were raided, his allies arrested. The guards who had once patrolled his estate surrendered without resistance, their paychecks worthless now. Emily vanished again, her face lost in the chaos. But she wasn't finished. Victor was only one head of the Hydra. His contacts, his clients, the men who thought they were untouchable, they were next. The world was her hunting ground now. Emily didn't wait for the fires at Victor Hall's estate to cool. She left Vermont behind before authorities arrived, slipping through back roads and abandoned stations, trading her identity once more. She became Harper Lewis, a quiet systems analyst for a small cybersecurity firm in Washington, D.C. No one noticed her. That was the point. In the sterile glow of her rented apartment, she expanded her reach. The files from Victor's servers had been the beginning, not the end. There were names she hadn't exposed yet. Politicians, law enforcement officials, businessmen who had stayed clean by sacrificing others. Emily had gathered enough evidence to bury them all. She infiltrated their networks, planting subtle markers, tracking their movements. Offshore accounts, private messages, hidden cameras in exclusive clubs where deals were whispered over glasses of bourbon. Emily cataloged it all, creating a lattice of blackmail, fraud, and murder. Her next target was Leonard Blackwell, a former senator with a reputation for philanthropy and clean politics. Victor's files had shown otherwise. Leonard had been instrumental in shielding the trafficking ring, ensuring law enforcement turned a blind eye in exchange for campaign donations and favors. Emily booked a room at the same luxury hotel where Leonard was holding a discreet fundraiser. She posed as a consultant, blending into the sea of tailored suits and practiced smiles. She hacked the hotel's security system, replacing Leonard's presentation slides with a montage of evidence. Recordings of his phone calls arranging shipments of girls, wire transfers to shell companies, photographs of him meeting with Victor. The moment the images appeared on the giant screen, chaos erupted. Leonard tried to shout it down, but the microphones were already transmitting the damning audio. Guests fled. Journalists who had been tipped off by anonymous messages flooded the lobby. Leonard's face went pale as cameras caught him slamming his fists into the table as his guards dragged him away from the flashing lights. By the time authorities arrived, Emily had already slipped out a side exit, the footage uploaded to servers across the globe. But she wasn't satisfied. One by one, she dismantled the network. She sent encrypted files to journalists implicating judges who had dismissed trafficking cases, CEOs who laundered money for the ring, and law enforcement officers who doctored reports. Protests ignited outside courthouses. Arrest warrants multiplied. Some suspects fled, only to find their bank accounts frozen and their passports revoked. Emily moved with precision, always one step ahead. She posed as a delivery driver to slip evidence into a corrupt sheriff's office. She disguised herself as a temp worker in a financial firm to copy incriminating ledgers. She planted listening devices in private jets and boardrooms. Her face became a ghost in surveillance footage, a blur, a shadow, an untraceable presence. But with each name crossed off her list, Emily felt a deepening emptiness. Justice was being served, but the hole inside her remained. She thought of the other girls in the cages, the ones she couldn't save. Their faces haunted her dreams. One night, as rain hammered the windows of her safe house, Emily sat before her laptop, watching the latest news broadcast. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Former Senator Blackwell arrested in trafficking scandal. Global crackdown on smuggling networks continues. High-profile businessmen indicted for organized crime. She should have felt satisfaction, but instead she felt a grim resolve. This wasn't just about justice. It was about making sure the world never forgot what these men had done, about ensuring no one else suffered as she had. Emily's eyes narrowed as she pulled up her next target, Sheriff Charles Denton, the man who had dismissed the missing person reports, who had buried evidence, who had laughed as he pocketed his bribes. It was time to finish what she started. Emily's hands trembled as she packed her bag one last time. Charles Denton wasn't just a name on a list. He was the face of betrayal, the man who had smiled as he buried her case file and pocketed cash stained with her blood. She'd waited years for this moment. Now, it was time. Denton's lake house stood isolated on the edge of a wooded shoreline. It was a retreat from the world, a fortress guarded by high fences and surveillance cameras. But Emily had planned for this. She arrived under the cover of a storm, rain hammering her hood as she bypassed the security systems with a small black device that pulsed quietly in her hand. She slipped through the fence, her breath shallow and steady. Inside, Denton sat in his living room, whiskey glass in hand, the flickering light of a muted television casting his face in sickly yellow. He was older now, softer around the edges, but his eyes still held the same smug cruelty. Emily stepped out of the shadows. He froze, glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. "You?" he rasped, voice hoarse with disbelief. "Me," she said. "Did you think you were safe? That the world would forget what you did?" Denton's face twisted in a sneer. "You're nothing. A broken little girl playing vigilante." Emily's smile was cold. She stepped closer, placing a flash drive on the table. "This contains everything. Every bribe, every cover-up, every piece of evidence you thought you destroyed. And it's already been sent to every news outlet in the country. By morning, your name will be synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Your friends won't save you. Your money won't buy you silence." Denton lunged for her, but she sidestepped, slamming him into the wall with a precision born of years spent learning how to survive. She handcuffed his wrists behind his back, dragging him outside into the storm. She forced him into his own car, tied his hands to the steering wheel, and whispered, "You'll stay here tonight, alone, knowing what's coming." Then she lit a flare and set it on the hood, its red light flashing against the rain. "I could leave you here to burn," she said, "but that would be too easy. You'll watch the world tear you apart, piece by piece, just like you did to me." She walked away, the storm soaking her to the bone, the crackle of the flare burning behind her. By dawn, the news had erupted. Videos of Denton's arrest circled every network. The evidence Emily had gathered triggered a wave of investigations across the country. Officials resigned in disgrace. Families of the victims found answers at last. Emily stood at the edge of a quiet cemetery, her coat heavy with rain. Before her lay two simple headstones, unmarked, save for the small etchings she had paid for in secret, for the girls who had never made it out of the cages, for the ones whose names had been lost. She knelt, her hands trembling as she placed a single white flower on each grave. "I did it," she whispered, her voice raw. "I made them pay. I made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else." A bird called from a tree above, its wings catching the pale light of the rising sun. Emily stood, her breath steadying. She turned away from the graves, her steps slow but sure. She wasn't Emily anymore, or Harper, or Rachel. Those names belonged to the girl who had been taken. Now she was simply free. The world was still stained with shadows, but for the first time in years, she felt the weight on her chest lift. She had taken back control. She had turned the prison they'd built for her into the cage that trapped them all. As she disappeared into the quiet morning, leaving behind the headstones in the past, Emily knew she would never stop fighting for those who had no voice. But this chapter was over. The fire inside her had burned out, leaving only the quiet satisfaction of justice done. And for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe.